Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Today we have a very special show with author Craig Childs. Thank you for joining us.
Sure, glad to be back.
Well, you were here in town for the New Mexico Environmental Law Center doing a program on wild and scenic films.
Yeah, we had a whole bunch of films, or they had a whole bunch of films last night.
And you had a film there called The Sense of Place.
Yeah.
Beautifully shot. And what was it about?
Oh, it was, I went out with a crew of a couple people that, with cameras, and went out into southeast Utah. We'd been going for weeks at a time, winter, fall, and we're looking at a part of the state that is under consideration for a new monument, and a place that's also at risk of tar sands development. So complicated canyon landscape, archaeology, wilderness. Yeah. We just put on packs and headed into the canyons and talked about the value of that place.
And I think the proposed national monument would be Greater Canyonlands. Is that?
Yeah, there are a number of different monuments that are being proposed out there. There's Greater Canyonlands, Bears Ears, Cedar Mesa. We're all hoping to get some kind of larger protection.
Yeah. Well, you've been on the show before. I'm a great fan of your writing.
Thanks.
You're an author, explorer, storyteller. Oh, my goodness. What did the New York Times call you? The 20th century bard of the American Southwest. And you've gotten so many literary awards, the Spirit of the West Award, the Rowell Award for the Art of Adventure. 2 times you've won the Sigurd Olson Nature Writing Award, and your newest book, Apocalyptic Planet, got an Orion Book Award and also the Sigurd Olson Nature Writing Award. You're just great. People can hear you on NPR. You write for the LA Times. You write for Outside Magazine, as well you should. Oh, yes, what the New York Times called you was a modern-day desert father.
Yeah. I'm a father. I end up in the desert.
Yeah.
It's true.
As a writer, you focus on the relationship between humanity and the landscape. And I'd sort of like to look at your work. You suggested once we look at it in terms of tree rings, because as you grow and expand. So let's just look at one of your early books is House of Rain. What did you do in House of Rain?
I walked a long way. I was following pre-Columbian migrations and patterns of movement in the early Pueblo world. So looking at the the Anasazi diaspora out of the Four Corners, Pueblo ancestry heading south during times of drought and conflict, and so basically I followed them. Started in Chaco, walked north to Aztec, and then up into Colorado, and round into Utah, and then all the way south across to Arizona.
And how long did you spend walking?
In legs, it took about a year and a half, and I probably covered about 1,000 miles on foot. I had a kid during that time, so it was a complicated venture, but eventually it worked out. Everything sewed together, and that book was created.
And you did The Secret Knowledge of Water. Yeah. And talk to me about what this book is about.
Yeah, that's water in the desert, and not from a perspective of dams or resources, but more the small water, or the isolated ephemeral water, water holes along the border with Mexico and Arizona, where I spent time mapping them for a wildlife refuge, looking at flash floods, looking at storm patterns and groundwater patterns, springs, seeps. So it was 2 years of adventuring in the desert, just looking for water, trying to survive, trying to get away from it at times.
Flash
trying
floods.
to get closer toward it. It's all an adventure around water in the American deserts.
We'll close with some of your later books, but I would like to focus for a little while on water. You recently gave a talk in Santa Fe that was called Ghost Water of the Southwest. And you did talk about all the different vocabulary for water.
Yeah.
talk to me. What does water mean to you and to us?
I guess the vocabulary is very personal. I imagine everybody has it, where I have different names for different kinds of water. You know, water that's still, water that sits, those old sun-warmed water holes, the tinajas down in well, all over the place, all across the Southwest, wherever rainwater gathers in holes, and then these flash floods. You know, I have categories of floods from, I call them ornamental, the little ones, just little fingers that are coming down, which it's stretching it to call it a flash flood, but it, you know, on a small scale, it really matters. I think everybody who sees water flowing, if you see the finger, the leading edge of it, your curiosity is drawn to it. And I think it happens everywhere. And then on the other end of the spectrum are what I called fear of God floods, that are just the huge floods thundering down canyons that are carrying trees and boulders. And, you know, they both, I guess writing about them and spending time around them, they both have their place. You know, the big flood is so exciting, and you're hoping to be in the right place and not the wrong place when it happens. But for me, getting as close as possible is the key, because then you get the smell, that incredible smell of flash floods. It's like compost of the desert, you know, everything sent down the canyon, and the sound of boulders turning in the canyon floor, and trees coming down. That's such a powerful moment, but at the same time, almost equally powerful is the trickle of water, where it's intimate, and you spend time with it, watching it make decisions, you know, watching go around the pine cone, go around the rock, go under the fallen tree. It's like being with an animal, a different kind of animal than anything else.
You talk about, that you can sense it as being alive. And then when you do look at the decisions, because I watched the fingers of water coming down, and which way is it going to go when it does find a small obstacle and then a greater obstacle?
Yeah, it is. It almost seems intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. I mean, well, it depends on how you define intelligence, but it's something that almost thinks, and it leaves a story in the ground wherever it goes. It leaves carves canyons, carves arroyos, leaves sand and mud patterns. It's always telling a story.
And you even describe that storytelling by water, that it sings to us.
Yeah.
And we all know that song, the song of a waterfall. You described actually up a slot canyon, and thinking that you were hearing people around the bend, and it was the water.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
When you get in the right space, you pick out the intricate voices of water, you know, the mumbling, the popping, and it echoes, and you can almost hear words. And many times I've been fully convinced that there were people there, that I've listened and said, you know what, that's a man, that's a woman, I can hear a child, I can hear the conversation, and then when I get there, nobody.
You describe, I think, this river in Arizona, which goes dormant by day and then starts again with this slow trickle at night. And then, can you explain how that happens?
Yeah, it's an amazing process.
It runs at night.
Yeah, that during the day, in the height of summer, it's so hot, and there's no water in the bottom of this drainage. And at night, it starts bubbling out. And then within an hour, you've got a full stream flowing with fish in it, with little dace. And what's going on is the trees are photosynthesizing at dawn, at sunrise, and so they draw down the water table. And so the water table drops beneath the surface, and the stream goes dry, and all the fish tuck under rocks and into matted pieces of debris, where they can go into torpor for the day, where their metabolisms just slow down. And then at night, the trees stop photosynthesizing, they let go of the water, and the water table rises again. And this is something looking for water, digging around a cottonwood to find water, that you might dig a hole and it's dry, but just you could wait until nightfall and see if some water starts coming into it. So it's a process that happens everywhere in a way, but in this spot in southern Arizona, it was just remarkable to watch, because it's a whole creek that's disappearing and coming back.
Wow. Yeah. You are staying near Santa Fe at a place where you said they had tested the water. I don't know how they do this. You have to tell me. And found the water was 13,000 years
Right.
old. How do you determine that?
Well, you look at the isotopes that are in the water,
Uh-huh.
and you can determine when they were last out in daylight and open air, and it's a complex process that I don't fully understand about the decay of these isotopes, and so you can get the ages of water. And what's interesting at this spot is that some of the water is 13,000 years old, some of the water is 30 years old. So different sources underground are meeting in the same place.
Wow.
And that gives you an idea of the labyrinth that we're on top of. That there's ice age water down below us. There's water from rain a few weeks ago, rain from decades ago, that they're all going to different layers, and they're moving through the ground, and then they're meeting in places and rising up. And so you can determine, okay, here the 13,000-year-old water is coming from over here, or maybe you can't determine. Maybe you just know that it's a maze down there.
Wow. That is mind-boggling to me. You, of course, in your explorations of all the cliff dwellings and the Anasazi dwellings, there's often a certain shape of doorway that's sort of almost tree-shaped.
Yeah.
But you say it indicates water. I mean, that the down-pointing part, not that we find water here, but that
Right.
is in honor of the location of water.
Right. There are many different theories about these T-shaped doorways, and they're all over the Southwest. Actually, T-shaped imagery goes on down to Central America and into Peru. So it's some kind of American symbol from 1,000 years ago. And in the Southwest, from what I've gathered, it is a representation of the underworld, of the water that's at the source of, the people came from an underground lake.
Ah, yes,
up
all
into
those
this world.
origin
And- yeah.
legends, yeah.
And that T-shaped door may be related to that. That may be talking about this underground lake, or also it's called an underground mountain, where you have the mountain above ground that gets rain and snow, and then that rain and snow goes under, down into the aquifers. And so that's what that story is about what is underneath.
You talk about going into some of these ancient dwellings, and there'll be a tree door, a T-shaped door, going back and back and back. Sometimes there at the very foot of the cliff, now in darkness, there'll be a small pond with a trickle, a tiny drip, drip, drip of water.
Yeah, I found one of those in the Sierra Madre. Excuse me.
Uh-huh. And you say that you like to go in there and extinguish your headlamp in the black darkness and hear that sound.
Yeah, you just sit in the back and
It's
and
like a
listen to that
geological
drop.
grandfather clock.
Yeah, and it tells you what the water table is doing. That's how you would know. I mean, the storms, how much snow you got, but what's the bigger picture of? And the groundwater really determines the bigger picture in drought and our use of water on the surface. And I saw this one site with the drips coming in, and I thought, oh, this must be some kind of barometer. I mean, sure, it could be used to collect water for drinking, but there wasn't that much water. It was just a little pool. And I thought this might be a way of knowing what is happening underground, which you would want to know. Your actions in the next year or 2 or 3 or 10 depend on how much groundwater there is. And I don't think things have changed that much. I think we're still operating on the same understandings or misunderstandings of what's happening underground.
Well, we're speaking today with Craig Childs, and we're speaking about one of his books, The Secret Knowledge of Water, but this has been a lifetime work for you.
Yeah.
In your later book, Apocalyptic Planet, where is it here? You go to all these places on Earth that have extremes weather. You say, if the Earth is going to end in one extreme or another, let's look at these extreme places. So you went to the Atacama Desert. How often does it rain there?
The rainfall there can be centuries apart. There are places where it hasn't rained in recorded history, so in 400 years. So it's a completely different situation than we see
Of
here.
course, but
it's like
it
another
is
planet.
one extreme.
Yeah, and there's water there too.
Yeah.
And that's what I found amazing. That I crossed a part of the desert with a friend, and we just carried our water and went out there. And you get in the bottom of these salars, these big, flat, salt expanses. And right in the middle, there would be a water site. And you couldn't drink it. It's salt water.
Yeah.
But it comes from snow melt up on these 19,000-foot peaks that are above the desert.
How far away?
There, you can see them.
Uh-huh.
The water flows down, and it pops up in the middle of this lifeless place where you don't see anything alive for days. Not a single thing. No ant, no fly. But you get out to these water sources, and there are pink flamingos.
Oh my goodness! How extraordinary!
Because they're straining out brine shrimp,
yeah.
and it's just the center of life wherever there's water, even if it's saltier than seawater, but even if it's that, there's still going to be life.
Yes. You say that in a way it's in our DNA to seek water, and one of the places you sought water in Apocalyptic Planet was in Patagonia. Talk to me about was it ice?
Yeah,
ice caves.
Oh, there's so much.
Yeah.
Patagonia. I was in Chilean Patagonia, looking at the ice retreat of the glaciers. And there are ice fields and crevasses, and it's an amazing landscape. But water is everywhere there. It's coming out of everything. Waterfalls nonstop, rivers, these turquoise colored rivers pouring out of glaciers. And what I found interesting there was that you don't travel with a water bottle, you travel with a cup. And whenever you're thirsty, you just dip it, and it doesn't matter what water you dip it into. If it's a pond, a lake, a stream, river, there's so much water that it's all clean. So it's not like here, where water is reduced and every drop is so precious. Out there, it was exploding from everything around us. And we ended up running one of the largest rivers in Chile from source to sea. So which source was up in the glaciers. So we went up and crossed the glaciers coming down off of one of the ice fields, and then put in rafts and kayaks below there and followed the river down to the sea.
You describe your geological core. Your home really is in maybe the western slope of the Rockies. I mean, you've started in Arizona.
Yeah.
And then you've lived in.
I've lived in Colorado and Arizona. Those are the only two states. My family is mostly from New Mexico, and so this is part of my world. But really, the core of my world runs from western Colorado and that part of Utah down into Mexico, and with New Mexico in there. It's just I guess the whole Southwest.
Yes. But we have particular water issues in the Southwest, and I'd love for you to address that. We've had a recent calamity, the mine tailings in the Animas River.
Right.
And we know there are all these abandoned mines all over the West, so that's like a huge vulnerability we have for our precious water.
Yeah.
But talk to us about water in the West.
There's a lot of it. There's more than we think. And I feel like the main issue here is that we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with what we have, because in a way there's enough water. We just use so much of it. We're not paying attention from year to year what's happening in the groundwater, what's happening to the aquifers. I mean, we are. There are plenty of people. There are hydrologists and legal teams working on this all the time. But I think we come to the Southwest with almost an East Coast mentality. We don't have the same vision of water here. I've gone to the East Coast, and you see there's water all over the place. There are rivers coming out of everything, and that creates one mentality. But then there's this place over here where water is a much more delicate issue, and it requires a completely different way of approaching it. It requires a different legal system. It requires different personal, daily, monthly, yearly habits.
But speaking of a different legal system, the laws of water in the West, there's an old saying that whiskey's for drinking, but water's for fighting.
Yeah.
And the arcane, antique water law still rules.
Yes.
And so I don't think they have anything like that in the East. I mean, we have, well, tell me
It
about
matters
it.
out here. It
Yeah,
matters
we don't-
who has the first water, who has the rights,
Yeah.
who's downstream. I mean, you look at it's been going on since humans arrived. They're the acequias here, from the 1600s, and then going back to over 1,000 years ago, the canals that were in Phoenix that were being used at the time. You look at their distribution of canals, and it's the same distribution that exists in Phoenix right now. The same canals in the same places were built 1,000 years ago, and they still had downstream users. And you can look at the crops at the time. You can look at the pollen counts, at the sediment in the canals, and determine that the downstream users were still getting water. So they had a deal worked out. That it wasn't just haphazard. They figured out some form of governing that could distribute water evenly between these different users. Headgates and cotton, pre-Columbian cotton, pre-Columbian corn. So it's always been an issue here, and I imagine it was fought over then. When you look at the collapse of these canal societies, you can see which ones collapsed first and which ones were consolidating around the headgates. So this has been happening for a long time.
And in your House of Rain, you walked from Chaco to everywhere the Anasazi could have gone. What percentage? How much was water a factor in that migration?
Oh, it was the factor.
It was it.
Yeah, it was probably drought that initiated the departure from the Four Corners area when people moved down more into the Rio Grande and then down into northern Arizona and southern Arizona. In fact, people kept going south. There's plenty of evidence that people from up here, or at least architecture and artifacts from up here, ended up as far down as Mexico. And this coincided with a drought. It was a significant drought, and it came after 200 to 400 years of good weather, which is another similar story, because we've had a couple hundred years of incredible weather that's been kind of anomalous. How it was over the last 200 years isn't how it usually is in the Southwest.
Yes.
So even without human input, even without us changing the environment, there are natural variations that could send this part of the world into a drought that could last 100 years easily.
And here we've just this year had so much rain.
Oh,
we think, I remember this. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we just have a couple of minutes left. You are my water wizard. Tell us, Westerners, what we need to know about water and what we can do to be sure that we treat it right, that we respect our water.
There are a lot of answers to that question. A lot of people everybody has a different relationship with it. Everybody has a different thing that they can do. And I don't think that there is one solution. Sure, there's conservation, but there are bigger questions around conservation, like how do you conserve? How do you use water? I think we assume that our individual gallons per person per day really don't matter, that it's not enough to count. But I think if we all understood water in this very visceral, necessary way, that it wasn't just flip on the faucet and let it run, but not that I would want everybody to do this, but I put 100 pounds of water on my back and walk into the desert sometimes and walk for weeks, and when you're searching for water, when you're carrying it, it is so important. It is so sacred that I think that if we all had an understanding like that, we would be treating it differently. We'd be thinking about what does it mean to take the Gila out of its drainage and move that entire river someplace else?
Yeah.
that's not how water works. There's an understanding of how it actually works that's going to take us a while, generations probably, to settle in. I think we're so new here that we just don't know how to do this. And to start with, I think understanding the sacredness, the importance of water, the rarity, the value of it. And that's not just that. I'm thinking 100 years down the line. I'm thinking 1,000 years down the line. It takes a while for civilization to figure out how to do it. And we need to recognize that this is the top of our priority here.
Yes, we do. Well, you've helped us recognize that. I'm so grateful to you and your work. We'll do another show about some of your other work with animals, but today I just wanted to really focus on water. We're speaking today with Craig Childs. We focused on this book, The Secret Knowledge of Water, also House of Rain, and Apocalyptic Planet, which we'll come back to. So I want to thank you for all the work you do. You are such a rare person. What you go and do, hardly anyone's doing that anymore. So thank you for your adventuresome spirit and your wise heart.
You're welcome. I love to be out there.
Yes, and I miss it. You make me miss it. Our guest today is Craig Childs. Thank you. And I'm Lorene Mills. I want to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.